Hi, everyone. Don Early here with the Devil You Don't Know podcast. We have a Kickstarter going on right now to raise funds for all of the startup costs for this podcast, and it ends on November 5th. We have already met our goal, and we could use your help in hitting some stretch goals to make the podcast even better. Even pledging $1 is huge for us and helps us build our audience. So head over to Kickstarter.com and enter The Devil You Don't Know in the search box. Come check out our rewards, and if nothing else, please just share the Kickstarter campaign on your social media. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of The Devil You Don't Know, the podcast that examines the historical and cultural relevance of the devil. Our guest today is Yasmin Bendas, creator and host of the podcast Me and My Muslim Friends, and she's here to help us understand who the devil is in Islam. Let's kick it. Hey, Emily. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Don.
Hey, Don.
It's time for more devil talk.
Yeah!
I'm ready.
I don't know a lot about the
Always.
devil. I need to know more that I don't know.
That is why we're here.
Yes.
Never stop learning.
Yeah. Well, today we are going to dive into the everyday American Muslim's understanding of the devil. I spoke with podcaster Yasmin Bendas, who she's the host and creator of Me and My Muslim Friends podcast.
Oh, cool.
And by the way, it's really good. You should go check it out. She's a real pro, and I'm taking notes.
Cool.
So, now, it is apparently it's a pretty big deal in Islam to never misrepresent things if at all possible. And so that's definitely on her mind in this interview. I tried to sort of make her feel, okay, hey, you know, you don't have to speak for all of the world's Muslims.
Oh, sure.
Half of the planets.
Right.
Yeah, we're good. So, but to that end, fact checking is always awesome. And so you listening at home, if you catch us saying something or come up with something that you know is completely errant, please shoot us a message, find us on the social medias, or, you know, post a comment wherever that shows up and let us know. Because,
for sure.
You know, we're all on a quest for greater understanding, and anything that we say on this podcast is our understanding at the time that we said it, and that understanding can and will change when presented with new evidence and information.
Yes.
I reserve the right to be entirely wrong.
Yes.
Fair enough.
I mean, that said, Yasmin is not a religion scholar, so we won't take what she says as absolute or applying to all Muslims like I talked about. This conversation was just about her understanding and what she's familiar with as, you know, a Muslim in America. Also, I did go on a couple of tangents in this interview that I edited out. And there's one transition that's a little wonky, so we'll just kind of do a quick interjection there. So
Don't tell me which one it is. I'm going to see if I can guess.
Yeah. and then we'll move on, and it'll be fine. All right, so you ready? Let's give this a listen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my guest today is the creator and host of the podcast Me and My Muslim Friends, based in North Carolina. She studied anthropology at Wake Forest University and medical and science journalism at UNC Chapel Hill. She has worked in Algeria, reporting for Al Jazeera, Reuters, and the Pulitzer Center. Yasmin Bendas, welcome to The Devil You Don't Know.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is we're, talking with people of different faith persuasions and getting their take on the devil. And so, obviously, you're here to help me with Islam. And, you know, the thing to know is that, you know, my goal with this podcast is to help general everyday people get a sense of where people are at. So Yeah, it's interesting and stuff when we can get, historians and scholars and stuff on. But I'm also really interested in just what is the everyday person's experience around this. So welcome to the show, and I'm excited to get going with this.
Thank you. I definitely do feel like I'm kind of your everyday, average, moderate. However, I'm definitely only speaking on behalf of myself.
Well,
I will say that. I'm sure that with as many denominations that we have within our faith, there are going to be some different understandings of this. So I can only speak to the way that I kind of grew up and how it has impacted my life. So I would just say, for your listeners to take that as one Muslim person's perspective. So
yeah,
kind of
that's
important
fair.
considering how many of us there are. Yeah.
Well, you're only the second largest religion in the world?
Exactly, right?
So.
I'm not a fan of having to represent all of that. So I can only represent myself today. Yeah.
That's all right. If I had to have one person on to represent the whole of Christianity, we would all know that would not be a fair representation.
Sure, right? Yeah.
Well, Yasmin, I confess that I know embarrassingly little about Islam, and I've kind of bulleted some things that I do know off the top of my head.
Okay.
So I'm aware that Islam started around the 6th century CE by a guy by the name of Muhammad, and he was in Mecca, and it was considered the prophet. It's an Abrahamic religion, meaning that it shares roots with Judaism and Christianity. I know that it shares stories with Abraham, obviously, in the Garden of Eden, and so there's a lot of that.
Genesis,
shared.
all that. Yep.
I know there's something that maybe it starts branching away from the other two Abrahamic religions with the character of Ishmael, which is Abraham's first son.
Isaac and Ishmael is where we have a difference in terms of which son was meant to be sacrificed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. The idea is he was supposed to sacrifice a son and instead sacrificed a ram. We have a whole holiday around that where we sacrifice lamb.
Okay.
Eat lamb that day.
I would like to be a Muslim that day. That'd be great.
I mean, it's really great food that day. I feel bad for any vegetarian, but they're literally, one of my projects in Algeria was on sheep herding, and that holiday is really the make or break profit day for sheep herders.
So let's see here. What else do I know? The Islamic scripture is known as the Quran.
It's one of our books.
Yeah, yes, I don't know much more about it than that.
Yeah, we have 5 books, actually. I think everyone considers the Quran it is obviously our primary book, but Torah, the original Psalms and Gospels are also of our books. Yeah.
Okay. And now we get to the devil, and this is where my knowledge gets real thin.
Mine does too. So
I only am aware that the devil is referred to as shaitan or iblis. A shaitan just always sounds like Sean Connery trying to say Satan to me. Shaitan.
It's really funny. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. He's a fallen angel because he would not prostrate himself before Adam as God commanded all the other angels to do. That's,
right.
Is out of pride and rebellion, as I understand.
Yeah.
I may be getting that wrong. That's just the kernels.
Sounds right. Like arrogance. Up. Yeah, out of arrogance. Yeah. He thought he was better, so he didn't want to bow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then something to do with jinn, which are supernatural beings of fire, and they are not wish-granting slave spirits trapped in a lamp.
No, not genies. No.
Yeah, so that's all that I am familiar with. I'm excited to hear what you found about your religion and the devil.
Yeah, I'm going to be totally transparent with you. I mean, when I said I feel like I know really basic things about the devil, I wasn't kidding. And I don't know how odd that is, but I was even looking things up, over the weekend. I was even on Wikipedia, which is as basic as you can get. And there were some things on Wikipedia I was like, yeah, that's how I was raised. And then there were other things where, there were, for me, the Iblis, the original devil figure who didn't bow, who we call Iblis. And there are other devils that are considered of of his ilk. I guess they're all from him. The plural in Arabic, so shaitan is one, and then shayateen is plural. So
Okay.
there are shayateen. There are like lots of devils. There's a whole bunch of them. And some people apparently on this page were saying that he's a jinn, he's not an angel. The way that I was raised was that he is a fallen, like he's an angel who disobeyed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of poking around. I maybe found a similar article on Wikipedia as you did. Something about there seemed to be like a confusion of, did he start as a jinn?
Right.
And then became an angel, or was it he is an angel and then became a jinn and he's the father of all jinns? Or are they just two separate stories?
I'm going to be totally real with you. I wish I knew a lot about this. Jinns really creep me out, and I don't know a ton about them. I don't consider jinns devils. Like I think they are in a realm, like a spiritual realm of their own that exists alongside us. And on the day of judgment, it's humans and jinn gathered together.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
So
I don't think they are, like, I'm sure they're a bad jinn, but I in my head, in the way that I was raised, and again, I don't know a ton about jinn. They're like really kind of creepy to me. I don't think they are devils. They're the ones who really try to get you to do bad things. I do think that the jinn, like I've heard, they can possess people or attach themselves to people, and you also want to avoid bad ones. But in terms of the figure of the devil and what the devil does, it's a little bit different than jinn.
Okay. So with the devil, I heard you say trying, and his ilk trying to sort of get people to do bad things. Is that like the tempter, the role of the tempter? Is that kind of
totally? Yes. I mean, I think there's a lot growing up, and this could be even verses, but there's this idea of, the devil whispering to you, literally whispering to you and tempting you to do things. And part of your role in your free will is to dissuade yourself from doing those things and not listening to the temptations. Yeah. Obviously, these could be basically anything bad. It could be, stealing. It could be anything that you think of as sinning, I think falls into this category. I think ultimately the goal of the devil is to move you away from God.
Okay. Now, would you describe the devil, or at least the stories of the devil, for in your context, as the personification of evil? Does that ring true, or is it kind of more different than that?
It's a really good question, because I think in some ways, if you just think about like this character, if you want to think of just Iblis, or if you want to think of the idea that there are several devils going around who whisper in your ear and try to get you to do bad things, I think there's definitely no goodness in them. Like, they are considered a very evil thing. So there's no goodness in shaitan or shayateen.
Okay.
And however, having said that, I think there is an acknowledgement that evil does exist outside of them.
So they are not necessarily...
That's how I've come to understand it anyway.
Sure.
For a few reasons.
Okay. That's helpful. I mean, because again, you've got also the jinn. You've said a few times now that jinn creep you out. Tell me about that. Why is
they totally creep me out? I honestly don't know a ton about them. There are like a lot of people who actually, I just saw something on an Instagram talk that like is part of, we don't celebrate Halloween, but because it's like Halloween is around the corner, that they were going to have like this seminar on jinns as part of like their student association event, and like just someone to teach you about jinn. And it's a little bit, they're not humanoid. The one thing that I do know is they really like bathrooms. There are like prayers you're supposed to say before entering and exiting a bathroom to protect you from them. Things like that. I think just this idea of, I feel like angels and devils, like, when you're taught, like, there's two angels with you, one of them is writing down the good things and one of them is writing down the bad things that you do. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, they can be on my shoulders. They can be here. But for jinn, like, I just don't really want to think about I don't want to think about them being around, They're creepy. I mean, I don't think it's not like this angelic thing.
Well, that's fascinating, because I'd never really heard of that before, and that to talk to somebody who has that strong of a reaction around the concept of what that would be like.
I mean, I don't know if it's like a more dependent on where you're from or raised, but I definitely have had friends who are like much more aware of jinn and who are much more aware of like ways to protect yourself from jinn. And it is a big part of our religion, so I really shouldn't be ignoring it. But yeah, there's someone who's writing a book on jinn. Her name is Yasmin. I'll have to like look up her last name, but I mean, there's stuff on this. If people are interested in learning more about jinn, there's definitely like contextual stuff on this. If you're just fascinated by that other realm, go for it. For me, I personally am okay with my limited knowledge. I'm all right.
So let's go back to Iblis. What are the stories that you know? What are if you were to encounter a conversation with somebody else about him, what would you say? What do you know? Or
personally, I really think the Iblis character is almost identical to the Genesis story. I mean, basically, it was an angel fallen from grace. I don't know if that's actually true, but I think it's more close to the Genesis story, and also that he enticed, Adam and Eve to kind of eat the apple.
Got it.
And I think part of his contract, I don't know if contract is the right word, but when God was like, you're not one of these angels anymore because you refused to bow, then the devil was like, my job now is going to be that I'm going to try to make your creation go astray. And he decided that was going to be his revenge. I don't know.
Okay.
Obligation, duty. Yeah. It's the foe. I mean, I think just interestingly for me, as someone with an anthropology background and things like that, just trying to understand these ideas of like good and bad. And our religion is also really focused on deeds, like very heavily focused on deeds. Like all of our good deeds are written down. All of our bad deeds are written down. On the day of judgment, we'll be presented with all of them. Like there's a scroll and a scale and all this stuff. And so I think, basically any religion, especially of the Abrahamic faith, it's basically, what you do while you're alive will matter. How you treat people and that sort of thing. Like there's a record keeping of it, right? So basically there's these bad devils rolling around, trying to mess up your record.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it because, if everything is being documented, then like it's literally keeping score.
Yes. But the thing that I really like about my faith is that your intention also counts for something.
Okay.
So if you intend to do the good deed, even if you intend to do the good deed, it counts for something. And I think I really love that. It's just the idea of like, are you trying to do good? Are you trying to better yourself? Are you trying to be good to other people? And all of these faiths also, they have this kind of awareness of human nature that, if you just thought you were here on earth and it probably didn't matter, you'd just be like hedonistic and rolling on this playground. Didn't matter how you treated other people, what you did with your life, just be selfish and do your own thing. I think there's a part of human nature that is like that. And I think that we have these characters personified in this way of, guard yourself against these whispers of temptation. That's not the kind of life you should live. You should be more disciplined. Maybe something that's a little bit different in Islam than some of the other denominations, I think maybe in Christianity as well, is we do have a complete free will. You have choices that you make in life that will affect heaven or hell. You're not like predestined into something necessarily.
And that's pretty universal among all of the Islamic denominations.
I have heard a lot about predestiny though, so I don't want to like completely say that. Like we believe, certain things are maktub, like maybe how many children you'll have. When you'll die is definitely maktub. Like how long your life will be. It's basically like when you're born, it's already written when you'll die. That sort of thing. This person might not live long. This person will live till they're old. This person will have this many kids. A lot of people use it, my age, like if you meet the person you're going to marry, like it was destined and you're going to meet this person, that sort of thing. So there's this idea of destiny that still exists. But there is a very strong emphasis on your choices and your free will as well. Yeah.
I think there's a topic that we're sort of leading up to here that I think kind of encapsulates some of this. At the judgment, we have, I assume, sort of separation of this lot will go to heaven and this lot will go to hell. Is that present?
You know what? I will say I was listening to your LDS episode, and they didn't actually have this concept of hell the way that we have hell.
Yeah.
Our hell is whatever you would think of, like the fire burning,
Interesting.
drinking boiling water. I mean, being tortured. You don't want to be there, right? Like This is not a place you want to go. Those are the depictions of it that I grew up with. And so you want to avoid landing in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I remember, a story that I remember growing up, was that there will be, as part of the sorting, there will be like a bridge you have to cross, and this bridge is going to be thinner than a hair.
Ooh.
And if you had faith and did good deeds, you would be able to cross this bridge. And if you didn't, you would fall, and you'd fall into hell, I think. And I just remember as a kid, that image was so terrifying. I was like, a bridge thinner than a hair. But yes, obviously too, there's this idea of the Day of Judgment too, that when you are being evaluated, everyone sees your evaluation. So everyone sees the good and bad that you've done. It becomes, apparent. It's all exposed.
So, and then Iblis, is he like the master of hell, or is he more like with the LDS, where like he's just here on earth doing his thing, and then hell is just this other thing?
Okay, so I definitely, one of the big things in my faith is to not give misinformation. So I'm hesitant to speak like very assuredly on that. But I don't think of him as on this earth.
Okay.
I don't think of hell as of earth.
So it is his realm.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
There's devils in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And is that a different realm than the jinn?
Yes. The way that I think of jinn, so like hell is a location. Like heaven is a location. It is a place you will go, right?
Oh, okay.
Jinn exist. Like if you had like, I don't know if it's like a multiverse or a alongside universe, you can't see them, but they're around you.
Yeah. So once again, kind of using the Stranger Things.
I miss so many cultural references because I don't watch a lot of television.
That's fair. Anyway, it's this idea that there are two realities overlapped.
Yeah.
And they're but and they don't really interact with each other, but they are like they look exactly the same, except one might look differently if you actually were to cross over into that, or vice versa. And
I don't think we can. Yeah, I don't think we can cross over. And no, I feel like that's just another realm.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Like I've never heard of that. I've never heard of like a human crossing over into jinn realm. That's just
sure. It's usually the other way around, I would imagine.
Yeah, they just exist kind of alongside. And jinn can, I don't know 100% if this is religiously or if it's more culturally, they can attach to you, like possess you and that sort of thing.
Okay. The other devils, they don't possess? Are you aware of stories around that, or
like
is that not really a thing?
Yeah,
like Exorcist.
I definitely don't feel qualified to speak on that. I definitely don't, like, we don't do the holy water for the devil stuff.
Right.
The way Catholics do. But having said that, for the other realm thing, like the devil and angels are also like around you as well.
Okay.
They don't just like exist in heaven and hell. Like they're also around you.
Okay. So reading again about this figure of the devil, and one thing that that popped out at me that I didn't quite realize is the angel Azazel. Is that familiar at all to you?
I feel like that name came up. Is that like a synonym or something?
From what I understand, Azazel originated within Islam, which I did not know.
I don't think I've ever heard that name.
Maybe that is wrong. Maybe I read that incorrectly entirely. But it was the angelic name of Iblis before he was Iblis.
Oh, like his name before he became Iblis?
Yeah.
I've never heard that name. It's a possibility. Don't rule it out.
I've known the name Azazel to be associated with the devil. I just assumed it was some weird.
It sounds a little creepy to me. Like we have a lot of the same angel names as in Christianity. Like Gabriel is a big figure for us, but we say Jibril. The Arabic version would be Jibril. I'm not familiar with the other name. Gabriel is a big figure though for us.
Oh, really?
Like he's visited prophets.
So speaking of prophet, tell me about Muhammad. What led him to found Islam?
So you're going to hear me say, like, I'll either say peace be upon him, or I'll use the Arabic, which is basically, it means peace be upon him, but it's sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, I wouldn't just casually say Muhammad, because for us, there needs to be some reverence. We also use symbols of reverence for prophets. So like when I say Jesus, I would also say like peace be upon him, which would be alayhi salam. Moses, alayhi salam. For the prophet, peace be upon him, we have like a very specific saying.
Okay. Yeah.
And we also say, like, you'll hear Muslims say Muhammad Rasulullah. Rasulullah literally means messenger of God. So, I mean, the story, I don't know how familiar people are with our prophet, but the story is that he meditated a lot. And he would visit this cave very frequently where he would meditate. And that it was actually Gabriel who came upon him and said, read in the name of your Lord. And our prophet was illiterate and could not read. And he was given these verses, and he basically learned these verses that he shared. And that became the Quran. The Quran is very much an oral tradition, and all of our verses are kind of verified once they were written, that enough people had to say they were said this way. And the Quran itself is very poetic. So it's kind of, if you think about it, to have someone who is illiterate be able to have this type of poetry, like there's such a rhythm and there's such a like grammar to the way the Quran is. Like, you can't misinterpret. Arabic itself is like, I took Arabic in college. I don't really speak Arabic that well, but and I had to learn Arabic when I was younger to be able to read the Quran. But Arabic itself is extremely logical in structure, like for plurals and references in terms of like them and I and you. It's also, you know, masculine and feminine, all of those junctures. English is like a really easy language.
Or it can be real difficult because of all the vagaries.
Yeah, lots of vagaries, but we don't have like masculine and feminine as much.
Right.
And there's less like grammatically, and also in terms of like tenses, we don't have as many tenses. Like a lot of other languages have like subjunctive and all these other tenses, if you've ever studied other languages. So just this idea that we had an illiterate prophet who was given this message, and it became like these beautiful recitations. That's how the religion started. And a lot of people at first didn't take him seriously. I think a lot of our faith is, you know, his struggles in people not believing him and not wanting to be drawn to our faith. I will say something that we learn about growing up is that prophets are not sent to a people because they're good, right? Prophets are not sent as messengers because those people don't have any lessons to learn. They're treating one another really well. In that era, there was like a lot of debauchery. There was like female infanticide. That was a big thing that got reversed with Islam in the region. So yeah, there was like, it's basically anytime there's a prophet sent to people, y'all aren't doing great.
Yeah, that makes sense. So much sense.
Yeah, at that time when he was coming in, a lot of people didn't want to listen to that stuff because they didn't really want to change their ways. But that's the, I guess, the revelation story.
Yeah,
and it was Gabriel.
Who was he prior to that, though? Do we have much understanding of his life prior? I mean, his
life was really hard. He was an orphan. We do know that. And our religion also really emphasizes being kind to orphans because of that. I honestly wish I could tell you a little bit more specific. I do know that at that time when he received his revelations, he was married to a woman named Khadija, and she was a businesswoman who was older, 15 years older, actually.
Okay.
And so, and I believe she was also a divorcee or a widow. One of the, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not wrong about that. But I do think that's true, because in our religion, like, divorce is not frowned upon in that way. Like, you should be able to marry someone who is divorced.
Oh, okay.
That sort of thing.
And so she was the first to really believe him.
She really supported him. Yeah, because she just knew what kind of person he was. And I also think I remember when I was taught about this, like, he literally thought, I think, you know, what has happened to me? Am I losing my mind?
Right.
Just imagine like an angel visiting you and be like, recite, you know? It's like, he wasn't like, cool, this is normal. Let me go along with this,
That's a really interesting story because the poem or the poetic kind of thing. I'm a classical languages major. I've studied Greek and Latin and the classics for a long time ago, but that was my focus. And the Iliad and the Odyssey, for instance, were not written. They were recited as well, and they're poems. That blows my mind that someone could commit that entire thing to memory. But, that sort of oral tradition, that's why, in historical and linguistic criticism of scripture and old text, there's a lot of, I think, critics who would say, oh, it's not reliable because they were oral tradition, so it's like, the game of telephone. Well, that can be true to a point, but I think your experience, what you're talking about, it's likely more accurate because they had to learn it very exacting. It's a very exact grammar, and it has a cadence, and it's easier to remember that way.
And there was a system of verification. So there, in terms of it actually being written, like a certain number of people had to say, we heard it that way. It wasn't just like people writing their own thing.
Was it just him, or did he have other friends? Or
no. The whole Quran was revealed through the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Okay,
it came through him. Is that what you mean? Like, was it revealed to other people?
Yeah. Well, no. Like, was anybody with him while he was receiving this?
To my knowledge, no. The way that I always understood it is it was revealed to him in private. That's such a good question, though. But yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, just a quick interjection here. This is that point I was talking about. So I got a bit off topic, and I was comparing the beginnings of the Islam with the Latter-day Saints. There's some commonalities there. So if you want to check out what that was unedited, you can subscribe to our Patreon at the $5 level a month or more, and you'll see the unedited video version of this interview and see exactly where I went with that. But let's jump back into the conversation. And right here, we're talking about the trials and sort of ill receptions that the prophets of most religions have had over time. So let's get back into it.
No one was like, thank you, sir. We definitely want to follow your ways.
Yeah. Oh, this is what we've been looking for this entire time.
That really wasn't the way it went down for anyone. No.
Right. Yeah.
Me and my mom, I remember we were watching, I think it's around Christmas every year. They put on like the Moses special.
Oh, sure.
Like TV. It's like on television. And, they do the whole burning bush and all this stuff. And we're like, we feel so bad for Moses. Like, he went through some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. There's some really well, and that's another key parallel there between Moses and your prophet is in that he received these visions and scripture, but he received them in the context of what was going on around them was out of control in some form or another.
Right. I mean, they were worshiping like the golden calf. It was all very hedonistic. Yeah. And then you also have, the situation with just like the pharaohs and this kind of evil domineering structures. I mean, I think the pharaohs believed they were God. So,
yeah. With what was going on in Mecca at the time, if I understand just from the, again, real brief surface scratch research I did, it seems like he was really sort of rallying against the polytheism of the time, and that
idolatry, especially idolatry was a big
like I'm always really interested to find out, okay, this thing sparked an entire religion, and I'm always interested in knowing what the catalyst for that was, because he was all along the monotheism route, right? That would have been way different than
yes. So that's probably the key differentiator actually in our faith versus Christianity. So for us, obviously, Jesus alayhi salam is a prophet. He is not Son of God,
Right.
not Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's not a Trinity in Islam. Actually, to become a Muslim, the Shahada is Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. That means I bear witness that there is no God but God, and that the Prophet Muhammad was his messenger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've even heard things like it's supposed to be really easy to say la ilaha illallah, like that you don't even have to move your lips so you can say it while you're dying.
Oh.
No, it's that profound and important.
Wow.
Yeah. That idea of there is no God but God. This oneness of God is extremely important in our faith. There is no division. It's actually like a huge shirk to pray to anything else or to hold, value of like, I can pray to this thing and it will change my life, or hold value to anything else in that way other than God. We don't pray to prophets like that either. There's not saints. There's no intermediaries. It's just you to God. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense, and that seems consistent from my very outsider observation.
Having said that, I do think that some denominations, like some sects of Sufism, do have saints.
So back to
the
Iblis. Yeah, back to the devil. It's interesting to me how similar your representations and the things that you've talked about are to sort of pop culture's understanding of the devil. There's a lot of parallels, a lot of parallels from the common Christianity understanding of Satan as a fallen angel or whatnot. And the notion of hell being the fiery thing, I wonder what influence Judaism and Christianity had in the era where the prophet was, among and where he was able to absorb,
I really just can't emphasize how many of our parables are the same as Christianity. I mean, being of the Abrahamic faith, so many of our prophets are exactly the same. I mean, Daniel, David, Job, Noah, Moses, Jesus and Mary as figures, like all of these people are the same for us, except for the figure of probably Jesus. Every other prophet, it's like the same story.
Sure.
So it makes sense to me that if that is the case, then the understanding of the devil and angels would also be the same, because technically the prophets were all kind of teaching the same message that we also follow and believe.
Yeah. And, and to put this into perspective, so 6th century CE, we're talking about, this is about 700 or so years before Dante and the Divine Comedy. And this is about 1,000 years before John Milton and Paradise Lost, which I think a lot of people who are critical about the Abrahamic religion say, well, they just got most of their ideas from these two poems. And it turns out
right?
it doesn't really seem to hold up. Definitely, I think the poems came out as an artistic representation of what they saw and what they were inspired by in their religion. But these notions have been around for a long time. And so this would also be around 300 or so years after Constantine, where Constantine was the emperor of the Roman Empire and converted to Christianity, and then so thereby converting the entire empire to Christianity.
He's the one that made Jesus white, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's entirely possible. But like all this happened like 300 years before the start of Islam. And so it's interesting to see that these other elements of Judaism and Christianity carried over into Islam.
100%. I mean, for me personally, I don't find that surprising at all.
Sure.
Like Judaism and Christianity, considering that we understand so much of our faith The best way that I can describe it is, I've heard that our prophet, peace be upon him, was the last one, because the other ones got it right to a certain point. They got it to a place that the message needed to come across, but ours was the final message. It was the cap on the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my understanding of it. So you can't really consider it a cap on the 3 if you don't recognize, the other two blocks, right? So they really do, the Abrahamic faiths really do feed into each other in that way. They have these key splits, right? Trinity versus complete monotheism, no God but God, that's it. But it's just not surprising to me. There's so much overlap. It's astonishing how much overlap to me, actually. Now,
does the name Lucifer ever come up in Islam?
I haven't heard that name, but I will say, my understanding of shayateen is it's not just Iblis. There's lots of them.
Okay.
But I have not heard, other than the name of the TV show or whatever. And whenever I've heard of Lucifer, I think of Iblis, but I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think of the angel that didn't bow down.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, that's fascinating. I've learned a ton about all this. I mean, I know you said a number of times that you're not an expert, but you live this day in and day out.
I feel like I gave you even less than a 101. The one thing that I really will say that I've always thought was interesting about the devil that we didn't talk about, though, was for Ramadan.
Okay.
Which is, we believe that the devils are locked up during Ramadan. Oh. And so for us, Ramadan is really, we're fasting and you're not drinking water or food from sunrise to sunset, but it's not just refusing food and carnal desires and things like that. If you're gossiping all day or you speak really harshly to someone, it's basically you're not upholding your fast. But personally, I think this idea of the devils being locked up, my personal interpretation of that has been to understand that some of these temptations and these negative characteristics are actually part of you. And you have to, kind of control that as part of this month. It's a real, you put in a lot of discipline to not eat or drink water, right? Mm-hmm. And so just to also be able to control your behavior, what you say, how you act, that's all part of that month. Charity is a really big part of that month. But I think, there's definitely that idea that the shayateen are locked up during Ramadan. And I think part of that is just to recognize your own inclinations, and you can't be oh, it's because devil, you have, this is part of your own will as well, sort of thing.
That's fair. So, and that comes back to what you said about the Islam being very deed oriented and or action. And so, during this time, during Ramadan, if the shayateen, is that right?
That's plural for devils, yeah. The devils.
The devils, the Iblis and the demons or devils or whatever are all locked up. Yeah. They can't influence anything. Then your deeds, you are so naked, you are so exposed. Everything you do is your responsibility at that point.
Right. I think that is just such an inward, spiritual looking month. And I will say, when you're not relying, when you don't have food and water and you're just going on mental will at that point, it becomes such a strong focus on also just how you carry yourself, what you do have control of, because you're going to feel hungry. Mm-hmm. That's out of your control. But now how are you going to speak? And are you still going to do these things you were forbidden to do? Can you be patient? Can you work with yourself through these things? I don't want to say monkish, but it's very, yeah.
So I assume that the devils are locked up in hell.
I think that's where they all go. Yep.
It seems logical.
Be hanging out.
Yeah, it seems logical. Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm thinking in terms of so Christianity has this big focus on forgiveness, right?
Yeah. Huge part of our faith, making dua, making prayers for forgiveness, even just, I've heard things when you're praying, I don't know if you know about our motions in prayer. You were standing and then you kind of it's really funny because when I do yoga, I actually find a lot of very similar poses in what we're doing. Like sujud, where you put your head on the ground, is really similar to child's pose. It's very calming. But there is kind of like this idea of when you go from standing, then there's a position where you bend over and your hands are on your knees, you stand up again, and then you kind of go into that child's pose like position, which we call sujud, that like you're carrying, you know, if you have sins or anything weighing on you, as you kind of bend over and bow down, they kind of fall off. It's just like kind of like this symbolic, you know, act of prayer. And for me too, I'll be totally honest, when I was growing up, prayer was like so ingrained. I didn't speak Arabic and it wasn't my native language. And so I just kind of felt like I was going through the motions. And then I kind of fell away from it. And then as I, you know, kind of in my mid-20s, I really started to focus on fasting, and I really started to try to pray as much as I could. Working from home has really helped, you know, like the pandemic and being at home, to try to meet like, you know, the 5 times a day. I still am not great at Fajr. Like I'm not a morning person. So I'll be totally honest that I need to work on that a lot more. That's like our first morning prayer of the day during Ramadan, like because we had to wake up then, I was good at it. But these ideas of like ritual being woven in as a practice are actually super important. And they kind of, I guess, are countering, you know, prayer is a way to not let the devil be close to you. A lot of times when we start prayer, or in a lot of situations, we say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." It's like a way to keep the devil away from you. So there is this acknowledgement of like, I'm in my space to pray now. You know, the devil is not going to be near me. I'm going to be focused on my prayer.
Yeah. So it's interesting that then there is an acknowledgement of the devil there. There is an awareness of that as part of the ritual.
I think like to say that when I said like I don't know a lot about the devil,
sure.
I didn't mean to say like we don't perceive him or a devil as around us constantly. That's not like it's something that we are battling against constantly to not be taken astray, because the devil's main mission is every day to take you astray in some way, in whatever moment of weakness possible. And that's also why like prayer is so important as like a form of redemption, and asking forgiveness is very important, because we are not angels. We are not perfect. We are made as humans. And so we are going to fault. It's just like an understanding of your nature is you're going to mess up. Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. That's all my questions for today that I can think of. Is there anything that we didn't cover that sticks out?
There was one more thing that came up where I was like, oh, I've heard of this. I've actually never been to Hajj. So the pilgrimage to Mecca. There is part of the pilgrimage where there are these pillars where people will throw stones, and they're considering themselves as throwing stones at the devil. These are like more fun. That's not a fun little thing, because like Hajj is one of like a huge pillar of our faith. If you can make Hajj, you're obligated to do Hajj. And that's part of it, is this stone. So the devil is, again, like a very much existent figure. You're throwing stones at him. I've heard that when we pray, there's a part of our prayer where we're seated and we point our finger like this. And we have a recitation. And I've heard like you'll see people sometimes when they're praying bounce their finger. And I've heard that means like you're hitting the devil over the head. Kind of like,
okay.
I don't know if that's actually true. You know, I hear all these things. When I was younger, I was told, you know, don't whisper, don't whistle, not whisper, whistle. That's calling the devil. There are so many like sometimes cultural things where I'm like, I don't know where they're from and how they fit. And then there's derivations. Like I think I had told you before, my mom is Iranian. So in Persian, like if you have a really mischievous kid, we call them a shaytun, which you'll see is like, again, a derivation of like shaitan, but shaytun just literally means like mischievous kid. Sometimes like joking, like a jokey kid, like shaytun, if someone's like really messing with you, like they're, or you can tell people like shaytun nakon, which means like, you know, don't mess with me like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are just like smaller things, I guess, the way that I've understood the devil. But again, it's a big figure, and it's, I think, existent in our faith and something that we work against. But once again, it's just this idea of, you know, why are we here on this earth, right? Like what every faith is trying to get at. What am I supposed to do when I'm here? How am I supposed to exist when I'm here? And I just think these figures like the devil and like angels, and understanding that you are different than them both. You're a human, but you have your free will and your choices. How will you do that while you're here? We consider this whole journey like a test. You know,
Right.
Are you going to choose the right path? I mean, in one of our surahs, which is the main surah that we say in every prayer, at Fatiha, it's I'm gonna mess it up right now because I always like mess up when I like try to say a verse out of. Am I making sense? Like,
Yeah.
Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Like we want to stay on this straight path, and the devil is kind of trying to get you off of this straight path. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It helps me to make sense of why I'm here, and it makes me to make sense of, you know, how I want to live every day, how I want to treat other people, how I want to treat myself, and the kind of person I want to be. But I don't necessarily think like, oh, if I do something bad, the devil made me do that necessarily.
Right.
Like, it might be, but it's just, you know.
So the devil really is part of the everyday consciousness.
Yeah.
Of everyday life, you know, in that way of it's, you know, you're trying to resist that. Yeah,
I mean, I think our faith is such an everyday practice, right? Like you're praying 5 times a day.
Yeah.
The ritual of this life is temporary, and you are here, you know, for other reasons. You know, you're here to worship, and you're here to become closer to God and do all these things. You can't really do that if you ignore that, you know, there's a devil that's going to try to take you off your path, I guess. I've never really thought of it like that. This show has got me like really thinking about it way more than I've really thought about it in a really long time. It's been very cool, actually.
Well, good. I hope that it's at least constructive.
No, it for sure has been such an interesting topic.
I do have one last question that came to mind, and I'm surprised I didn't ask it earlier. What does the devil look like in Islam?
Oh, yeah. You know, I was looking this up too. I have always heard that the devil had hooves, but I don't know what he actually looks like. I know that like in Islamic art, I think there are depictions, like I saw on some of the stuff that I was scrolling through, like ancient Persian art included some depictions, and it kind of looked like what you would think of, you know, horns. And I've seen black and red. So for me, though, growing up, I wasn't like shown a picture like, hey, this is what the devil looks like. I don't have that image in my head. I think most of my image comes from popular culture in that way. Yeah. And for us, even a lot of like Islamic art and architecture avoids figures, like especially of people. We don't have a depiction of like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like we don't depict stuff like that. So I'm not surprised that we haven't been so focused on the figure of him. But
that makes sense, especially with your focus on being against idolatry and those kinds of things. I could see where that could be
I mean, if I had to guess, though, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the drawings, and like I said, the ones that I did come across when I was looking up stuff on this, look like your normal depictions.
Well, thank you, Yasmin. This was awesome. Definitely learned a lot about the devil I didn't know in Islam. And it's really cool to talk to somebody who lives this every day. This is something that you cherish, and that this is a part of your life. And I think that's really meaningful, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me today.
Thank you. I apologize, you know, if any Muslims are listening to this and I missaid something. I mean, let Dawn know.
Yes, in fact, please do let us know if it has anything come up, you know, in these conversations. If there's questions that you wanted to ask, you can ping us on our social medias.
Yeah, don't be too harsh. I mean, I did my best.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you again. And
okay, so this was an amazing interview. Dawn, you did a great job with this. And Yasmin is really engaging. I totally get that she has her own podcast. She really has like the delivery down. I shared this interview actually with Katie, so she got a kind of a sneak preview about this because I had to talk with someone about it. I was so into it and so engaged. I thought it was super cool how she set up what she was going to be speaking with you about when you started talking about the prophets. And she explained that, hey, by the way, when I discuss the prophets, so that you know what I'm doing, and letting you know that the blessings be upon him, and saying the same thing about Jesus as the other prophets. I thought it was really cool because it got me listening for it. And I heard it when it was coming up. And so I was very clear on who she was discussing and what she was referring to, what she was meaning. And I know she said she's not an expert, and she wasn't going to take any of this as like, she's not representative of everybody. She's representative of her thoughts. But I really appreciated the levels that she went into for the information that she had, and even the ones she didn't. I'm really curious about jinn. I know she said it freaked her out, but like, I now want to go find out more about them myself, because it seems so fascinating. I kept trying to draw parallels. Like, would I call them fae based on my world, like other planar dimensional creatures, but not like, it was very interesting.
Yeah.
So
no, I actually have a little bit more information on that because of the conversation we had about that. And she was saying, she kept repeating herself, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know much about jinn. They just freak me out and they're creepy and I don't want anything to do with them, which I completely appreciate. So my understanding is first of all, they are made of fire, or they are made from fire.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
And so they are of the fire element, and they can be evil, they can be good, they can be neutral. But they are completely separate from demons. They are not demons. They are their own.
Okay. That was my question.
Yeah, they're their own being. They live in a realm that is completely separate from the devils and demons and shaitan, iblis. So that is different. And then I also, everybody, if you want to learn a lot more about this, I've got some reading material for you in the link tree. Got lots of different links that you can go down the rabbit hole on this. She did reference a book that was going to be about jinn specifically. And that is going to be called Jinnology with a D. Jinnology.
I'm so happy with that.
Yeah.
That's such a good pun.
And that's going to be by Seema, Yasmin, and I hope I get this pronunciation right, Famida Azim. And the big thing is so Jinnology will not be out until 2023. It's a book that isn't published yet. Sounds like it's going to be a real cool book, and I definitely plan on seeing if I can pick that up when it comes out. I do also, one other thing. I said that I probably said this wrong about Azazel, and I was absolutely correct in saying that I was wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. I know I read it in the reading that I was doing for the research, that it, for some reason, I thought it, or I got the impression that it originated in Islam. No, it fucking didn't. It came, it's completely from Judaism. It's absolutely in the Hebrew Bible. I should have known that. I probably did know that, but it was like, ooh, new things about Islam. That's awesome about Azazel. And I didn't know. I thought it did not. Stop it, Don.
No, I mean, there were a couple, I get it. Like, you were trying to relate to things, right? There's so much that's new about this. And even in that context, like I was just saying, I was trying to create context for understanding. I was really wanting to absorb all of it, but I'm so used to like making things mean things so that I can create parallels, whether it's because I want to talk to them or because I want to just really fully understand it. And this was very, very new. So there are a lot of things that I totally get you working to put pieces together and trying to connect 2 points because you're also trying to absorb that information. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Give yourself a break.
Oh, it's fine. Just for the listener's sake, though, who are going, what the fuck are you talking?
He is such an idiot.
I'm doing my homework, folks, and I will correct it if I know I'm wrong, all right?
One thing that I thought was really great was, so the three Abrahamic religions. The Muslim faith is Islam, right?
So when you refer to the people, they're Muslims.
Muslim. And so the Islam faith
religion is Islam.
Islam. Okay. So see how little I know. So Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So Islam is definitely the one that I know the least about. I do know that the three of them have similarities. I didn't know how similar they are.
Yeah.
When she was explaining that, yeah, we have like the same angels. We Gabriel, my mind was blown. Of course they do. I mean, when I thought about it, I was just like, well, yeah. I mean, the stories are the same going up to Abraham, and that's where it differs with Isaac and Ishmael, and which was the favored child there. But yeah, applying that to the angels, that was eye-opening to me. I knew the faiths were similar. I didn't realize how similar. I just lapped up this interview. I lapped it up. It was so good.
Well, I had a similar reaction as far as like how similar things were, because in my mind I was like, oh, well, there's definitely these major differences that separate the religions, and sure there are, but yeah, I at the end of the interview I was like, wow, there's a lot more in common than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And in particular, the concept of hell, and the angels and these kinds of things, and it makes sense in retrospect. It makes sense if Islam has its beginning in the 6th century AD or Common Era CE. This is 300 years after Constantine.
Yeah.
And so Christianity has hit a full stride in being the empirical religion. Of course, that influence is going to be out there.
And it was great putting that to a timeline and the years and stuff, and comparing the years where this happened and this happened when this was written. So there's that history geek in me, I want to chart out everything when this happened. So I just, that was fascinating to me. And I think of religions so much as almost they're people's beliefs. People have different beliefs in God or gods. It's so personal to you. And I guess being able to put it down to timelines, it makes it so much more concrete for me to understand, rather than just some mythos that's out there, So I really appreciated that aspect of it too.
One thing that I've sort of come to look at religion like is religion is art to me. I don't know if I've said this before, but to me, I approach religion like I approach art, and that religion is this creative process that's been going on for thousands of years, affecting people as they experience it, just like art. There's an experience in creating the art, and there's an experience in consuming the art and participating in it. And that's also, with dance and with art, you can transcend your consciousness. You can get into different states of consciousness. Just ask, again, any dancer. You can go some really cool places. But
that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and for me, if I can do that, then that allows me to sort of let it be what it is to be, and that I don't have to own that. I can take my own artistic interpretation or whatever it is, but I can also, like you were saying, put it up there with sort of like art history and get the story around it too, and get the context.
Yeah. For me, the way my brain processes things, I really like that aspect. Well, this is what was happening during that time. This was who was in charge. These were the works that were circling around. So this would have been on the minds of people at this time. I really need a context like that a lot of times. And I guess that's why I like reading history and studying things like this, but hearing it in the conversation when she was talking, and then you throwing in your bits of history knowledge, it was like the best history lecture ever. I loved it.
So there was a bit, in fact, Yasmin and I have been discussing back and forth since the interview about the conversation around Iblis. Is he a jinn or is he a fallen angel?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was up in the air.
It is. And
Yeah.
After doing a little bit more research on that, we're still up in the air.
Oh, really?
So,
Wow.
yeah.
There's not like a concrete story about.
Well, there is, but
Okay.
again with the interpretation. So the evidence seems to go in either direction, and you could make the argument that no matter which way you go, it doesn't contradict itself.
Oh.
There's just a lot of influences in the way you can read the texts. So there's one text in particular that
I was going to ask, do you have a passage?
I do.
As an
That
example?
names specifically Iblis as a jinn. And this is Quran Surah 18, chapter 18, verse 50. Now, again, I don't know if I pronounce that right. I'm sorry. The English translation says, when we said to the angels, we is capitalized, and when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, and they prostrated, except for Iblis, he was of the jinn and departed, which means disobeyed, the command of his Lord. That's the passage that people go, oh, well, obviously right there. Well, to me, and just because of my study of texts and things like that, the way it's written to me sound, especially, this is the English translation anyway, so I don't really know, and I don't know Arabic, so I have no idea how good of a translation that is, but the line sounds like it was more of an editorial add-on to me. And that's something that was very common in biblical texts. As, we go on, there is the clarification, someone would interject something in there. And so again, people will criticize the validity of the text because, maybe they think somebody added something to it. Whether or not they did, and whether or not this was a editorial add-on, what it does do is it reflects that the sentiment at the time was that Iblis was a jinn, right? In that particular text.
He was of the jinn. I guess it could also be interpreted as if you're of this group over here, you're part of the group, but not necessarily like
one of them.
The same. You're of them, so you're hanging out together, you're with them, but you might not be that same thing.
And see, the of the immediately called back to the translation of the Greek and Hebrew, where of that means not one of, but acting as.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my he's behaving like a jinn when I see of the, that could be the other way.
Some of the extrapolations and whatnot that I've came across with different Islamic scholars is they'll take a look at this, and I think there's a fairly, at least on the sort of more modern scholarship, it's kind of leaning more towards that Shaitan, Iblis, was a jinn. In particular, it's because jinn can rebel against God. They have free will, and angels do not. They don't have the capability to rebel or to choose not to follow God. And so there's a logical argument that says, well, if Iblis rebelled against God, then he couldn't be an angel because he doesn't have that capability.
Right.
But there's other, I found other, commentaries on the text that argue that he was a fallen angel and that he specifically could rebel and choose, differently. Maybe of the jinn, he's acting like a jinn, in that regard. You could go in that direction.
Yeah.
There's definitely a strong tradition of that Iblis is a angel that had fallen. The main important thing to take away from the texts, whether he is this or that, the important thing is that he thought himself superior to humans, refused to bow to Adam, and made it his mission to lead humanity astray against God. I mean, I think that's ultimately
the general hold, right? And that tees up real nicely for Shaitan And so now he's Shaitan, but he's Shaitan, if I understand correctly, he was Shaitan as his interaction, right? So he's referred to as Shaitan while he's the Tempter, which is the constant force that's there, which I found really interesting to hear, because my mom, who is a super Protestant Christian, who's really all about the exact word of God being the real living word, and is convinced that she is in demonic warfare on a daily basis, that she is constantly fighting up and defending herself and praying against and girding herself up against this supernatural attack that's being handed to her and everybody else. The demons are constantly attacking and trying to influence and tempt humanity. And I was like, well, that sounds familiar. Again, that parallel, that similar thing of the constant defense against the attack of Shaitan. And I was like, oh, wow, that's right on the same page.
Yeah. And their prayers being so active and physical, and that the sort of what they do with their bodies and their language is to ward off Iblis and the demons, and their daily prayers and their daily practices. Like, the devil is there. It's right there in their daily lives. But it's part of the, okay, I'm doing this, you can't be here kind of thing.
Right. And then Ramadan. All sorts of education on that one for me, for sure.
But yeah, again, the similarities. Little teaser. So I did a whole bunch of research this weekend, and I planned out the ancient origins episodes that I've been working on in the background. And so we're going to start out with ancient Egypt and the Egyptian mythos. We'll then transition into a new episode of religions from Mesopotamia and Canaan.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Then we'll end with Zoroastrianism and Zarathustra, in particular Ahriman, which is the first devil, the first specifically formed, definitely Prince of Darkness devil figure that we have. And I go into the myths. It's incredible that what came out of this interview ties in. You're going to see like where some of this came from, like that bridge she talked about. The bridge that, like, when you die and you're going to cross the bridge
of a hair.
Yeah.
Thin as a hair.
Well, it seems like it comes from this other myth, and it's a little different, but you can see where they got it. So I'm excited to bring you along on that.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Sounds great.
I'm excited to hear about it.
The next episode that we're going to do is covering what is the devil? What is the concept of the devil? I know we've talked about the personification of evil, but as we've seen with these interviews, it's a lot more than that. And even with, Satanism, the devil isn't evil.
Right.
We've got to take that into account. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the concepts and what makes up a concept. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we've learned about who the devil is to different peoples so far in our journeys. And so we'll kind of lay a groundwork of these are the concepts we've heard and that we know about either from our own upbringing or pop culture. We'll just kind of list it all out there. And then we'll dive into the history and uncover where some of this stuff came from.
Awesome.
Yeah, for real. That sounds great, man.
Lots of good stuff coming up. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This was The Devil You Don't Know. Check out our show notes and resource links on our link tree located in the description of this episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. It really does help the show. You can also follow us at social media at facebook.com/TheDevilPodcast, Twitter @TheDevilPodcast, Instagram TheDevilPodcast, and YouTube, yeah, you guessed it, The Devil You Don't Know. Patreon also at patreon.com/TheDevilPodcast. Reminder, Definitely try to subscribe to us if you really enjoy the show so you can hear more episodes that are coming up. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Buzzsprouts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, thanks for listening.
The Devil You Don't Know podcast supports anti-racism, and you can too. Just go to our Linktree page at linktr.ee/thedevilpodcast. You'll see the Support Anti-Racism banner at the bottom with an Act Now button. From there, you can make donations to various anti-racism organizations and causes, get education materials, and sign up for events. From all of us here at The Devil You Don't Know, we thank you for supporting anti-racism.